Have you ever wondered what happens to a person when the world stops noticing them? Have you ever asked yourself if God still listens when your voice has grown weak, or when your prayers sound like whispers lost in the air? This is the story of an old man, a story of loneliness, waiting, and an unexpected encounter with the God he thought had forgotten him. His name was Elias. At 84 years old, his world had grown small, shrinking slowly, quietly, almost without him noticing. His wife had passed 10 years earlier. His 2 children lived busy lives in other states, and the neighbors he once knew had moved away long ago. His home sat at the edge of a quiet street, where the wind carried the sound of passing cars, but never laughter, never conversation, never footsteps coming toward his door. Most days felt the same. He woke up to a house that echoed back his breathing, warmed up a pot of oatmeal, and sat by the window watching life go on without him. But this winter was different. His health had begun to fail faster than usual. His legs trembled when he stood. His hands shook even when he tried to hold a cup, and some mornings he woke up struggling just to catch a full breath. Doctors told him it was normal for someone your age, but nothing about the fear felt normal to him. He prayed every night, yet every morning he wondered whether God still heard those prayers, or if they simply faded into the ceiling above his bed. And yet, Elias never complained. He simply whispered, "Lord, I'm still here," hoping heaven would answer one day. One evening, during the coldest week of the year, the power went out in his neighborhood. The sudden darkness startled him, and for a moment he froze in his chair. The silence felt heavier than usual, the shadows deeper, and the loneliness sharper. He reached for the flashlight he kept beside the table, but his trembling hands knocked it to the floor. As the room went dark, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear rising from deep inside his chest. And for the first time in months, Elias cried. Not a loud cry, not the kind that shakes the body, but the kind that comes quietly, like a broken memory bleeding through the heart. He whispered, "God, please, don't leave me alone tonight." Minutes passed, then an hour. The cold began to settle into his bones. Every small sound felt threatening: the wind against the windows, the crack in the ceiling, the hum of something outside. He wrapped himself in a blanket, but no blanket could warm the ache of being forgotten. He remembered a verse his wife used to say when he felt anxious. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." But tonight it felt far away. Was God still close? Was he still watching? Did he still remember Elias, a man whose voice had almost disappeared? He didn't know, but heaven did. It was close to midnight when Elias heard a sound, soft at first, almost like footsteps on the porch. He thought he imagined it, until the sound came again. A gentle knock, 3 slow taps on the front door. Elias felt his heart race. No one visited him, not at this hour, not during a blackout. He reached for his cane and slowly stood up, each step trembling, each breath heavy. The knocking continued, calm, patient, almost comforting. He opened the door halfway, expecting to see a neighbor, or maybe no one at all, but what he saw made him freeze. A man stood there holding a lantern. The light from it glowed warm against the cold winter air, illuminating a face Elias couldn't quite explain. The stranger looked young, but ancient at the same time, strong yet gentle. His eyes held the kind of peace Elias hadn't felt in decades. "Elias," the man said softly, as if he had known him forever. "I've come to sit with you." The old man's breath caught. How do you know my name?" The stranger smiled warm enough to melt winter itself. "I've known it since the beginning." Elias stepped back, letting the light wash into the room. His fear soft, not gone, but fading like the end of a storm. The man entered quietly, placing the lantern on the table where the flashlight had fallen. The warm glow filled the house with a presence Elias couldn't describe, like comfort, like safety, like home. Why are you here?" Elias whispered. The man turned to him, eyes filled with compassion so deep it made Elias tremble. "Because you thought you were alone," he said. "But you never were." Elias felt his knees weaken, and tears filled his tired eyes. Are you an angel?" The man stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Elias's shoulder. His touch felt like warmth spreading through frozen bones, like life returning to places long forgotten. "I am the one who has always walked beside you," he whispered. "In your youth, in your grief, in your sickness, in your silence. You spoke to me every night, Elias. Not one of those prayers was lost." Elias collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by the presence filling the room. He covered his face with trembling hands, whispering, "Lord, Lord, is it you?" The man knelt beside him, gently lifting Elias's chin. "Tonight," he said, "you will know how deeply you are loved. And for the first time in 10 years, Elias felt something he thought he would never feel again: hope. Night settled in around the small hospital room, but inside, the ache in Mr. Harrison's chest felt heavier than the darkness beyond the window. He lay on his side, watching the faint glow of the hallway reflect off the cold floor tiles. Nurses moved quietly, checking charts, whispering to one another. The world outside his door continued, but his world had grown painfully still. For hours he had been replaying the same question again and again. Has God forgotten me? He remembered the days when he was strong, when he worked long shifts at the factory, when he carried his children on his shoulders and laughed without fear. Now, every breath felt borrowed, and every minute felt uncertain. The distance between who he used to be and who he had become felt impossible to cross. He looked around the room, sterile, silent, filled with machines that hummed without emotion. The loneliness pressed against him in a way that made his eyes burn. He tried praying earlier that afternoon, whispering a shaky, "Lord, please help me," but the words landed flat in the air. He felt no warmth, no whisper, no reassurance, just silence. And that silence terrified him. As he shifted in the bed, he felt a sharp pull in his chest, a reminder of the illness that had taken so much from him. His hands trembled as he reached for the small notebook his wife had given him years ago, before she passed. The cover was worn, the edges frayed, but inside were notes she wrote for him, verses, prayers, and reminders that God was near. He opened to a page that always comforted him. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Tonight, though, those words felt distant, as if written for someone else, someone stronger, someone more faithful. He wondered if his doubt had pushed God away, or if the years of pain had made him too tired to feel anything holy anymore. A sudden cough rattled his chest, and he closed his eyes tightly, exhausted. When he opened them again, the room felt colder. The clock on the wall blinked 2:14 a.m., the hour when despair feels heaviest. He swallowed hard, thinking about his children living states away, too busy to visit, too wrapped up in their own lives to notice their father fading. He didn't blame them. Life moves quickly, and illness can be uncomfortable to witness. But still, the emptiness stung. He whispered almost silently, "God, if you're still there, please don't leave me like this." His voice cracked, fragile, barely a breath. Then he waited, hoping for something, anything. Minutes passed. Nothing changed, or so he thought. A soft sound, like the gentlest rustle, drifted through the room. The air shifted, not colder, not warmer, but somehow deeper, fuller. Mr. Harrison blinked, thinking he was imagining things. But then a soft glow formed near the foot of his bed, subtle at first, then steadily brightening. Not harsh, not blinding, but warm, like sunlight slipping through an open door. He felt his heartbeat slow down, not out of fear, but out of a strange, unexpected peace he hadn't felt in years. He tried to lift his head, but he didn't need to. Because he knew. Before his eyes fully focused, he knew he was not alone anymore. The presence in the room didn't speak, yet something in his spirit recognized it immediately. It wasn't the nurse. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a dream. It was something familiar, something ancient, something overwhelmingly gentle. He felt it before he saw it clearly, the sense of being held, surrounded, protected. Tears slipped down his cheeks without warning as he whispered, "Lord, is that you?" His voice trembled, but the room itself seemed to breathe with him, as if answering without words. His pain eased slightly, his fear loosened its grip, and for the first time that night, he felt seen. He blinked again, trying to steady his eyes on the soft glow near the foot of his bed. It stretched upward, tender and graceful, forming what looked like the outline of a figure's shoulders, a robe, hands that radiated compassion. Not dramatic, not loud, not cinematic, just real. Real enough that his heart recognized the truth even before his mind could process it. He brought a trembling hand to his chest and let out a broken whisper, "I thought you forgot me." A warmth, so subtle it felt like a breath, settled over him, as though an invisible hand rested gently near his heart. Not healing every illness instantly, not performing a grand miracle, but something deeper, quiet reassurance, a reminder, a presence, a love that had never left. And in that moment, in a small hospital room at 2:14 a.m., Mr. Harrison realized something powerful. God had not forgotten him, not for a moment. Even in silence, even in loneliness, even in the ache of waiting, God had been there, closer than his next breath. He felt something break inside him, not his spirit, but the weight that had been crushing it. For the first time in a very long time, he let himself cry, not from fear, but from relief, because he finally knew he was not alone, and he never had been. The next morning, the doctors walked into Mr. Hale's room, expecting the same quiet heaviness that had filled it for weeks. But something was different. The air felt warmer. The light from the window seemed brighter. And for the first time in a long time, Mr. Hale was sitting upright, as if strength had quietly returned to his bones while he slept. The nurse froze for a moment, staring at him with surprise. "You look awake today," she whispered. He simply nodded, because words felt too small to explain what had happened last night. How his room, usually cold and dim, had felt like heaven had stepped inside for a moment. How peace had wrapped around him like a blanket, steadying every trembling part of his heart. He didn't tell her everything, because he knew she wouldn't understand. But deep inside, he knew God had not forgotten him. Later that afternoon, Claire returned, holding a cup of warm tea and a hesitant smile. She expected to see him still exhausted, still fading. Instead, she found him looking out the window, his gaze focused on something far beyond what eyes could see. "You look different," she murmured, placing the tea beside him. He turned toward her slowly and said, "Last night, I realized something. I kept thinking God was silent, but it wasn't silence. He was holding me still, so I could hear him better." Claire's eyes softened, and tears blurred her vision. She had prayed for months that he would feel God again, that he would know he wasn't abandoned. And now, hearing him speak with this quiet certainty, she felt her own prayer answered. As the days passed, Mr. Hale continued to regain small pieces of strength. Not enough to walk far, not enough to be free from pain, but enough to feel present again, enough to feel the warmth of God's nearness. The nights felt less heavy, the mornings felt softer, and every time the loneliness tried to whisper again, he remembered the moment God stood beside him in the silence. He remembered the voice that wasn't a voice, the comfort that wasn't tangible, yet filled him more deeply than anything else ever had. He wasn't healed overnight, but he was held, and that changed everything. One evening, while the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in soft gold and lavender, Mr. Hale asked Claire to bring him his old Bible. the one with worn pages and fragile edges, the one he hadn't opened since sorrow took over his life. When he held it again, his hands shook not from weakness, but from emotion. It felt like holding a piece of his younger self, a version of him that believed prayers were heard instantly, that miracles always happened fast. But now, as an old man, he knew something deeper. Miracles weren't always loud. They weren't always dramatic. Sometimes miracles were quiet shifts inside a tired heart, a soft returning of hope, a slow rebuilding of faith. That night, after Claire went home, he whispered a prayer, not begging, not pleading, just acknowledging God's nearness. "Thank you," he breathed, "for remembering me when I forgot how to remember you." And in the stillness, he felt it again, peace settling over him like warm hands resting gently on his shoulders. He realized then that even if God didn't heal him completely, even if he remained weak in body, he was no longer weak in spirit. And that was enough. Weeks later, the doctors finally released him to go home. Claire helped him walk out of the hospital, step by slow step, sunlight touching his face like a blessing. The breeze felt new. The sky felt wide. And for the first time in many years, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel forgotten. He felt carried. At home, his old rocking chair waited for him, the one he used to sit in while watching the birds outside his window. He lowered himself into it gently, breathing in the scent of familiarity. And as he looked out at the world, he whispered the prayer that now lived in his heart. "Lord, let my final days be filled with your presence, not fear. Let every breath I have left remind someone that you never forget your children." From that day forward, he spent his evenings praying for others, people who felt lost, people who felt unseen, people who believed God had turned away. He knew their pain because he had lived it, and he knew their hope because heaven had met him in the quiet. And on his last night, when the world outside was silent and the moon was gentle, Mr. Hall closed his eyes with a peaceful smile, not because his suffering was over, but because he finally understood God had never forgotten him. Not once, not ever.